Fewer people want to visit us here in the United States. Travel experts say there are fewer international travelers coming here.
In terms of the second quarter, this was a beat on the top and the bottom line.
The heart of America's travel industry is beating quietly in the summer of 2025. A stark contrast to the crowds and chaos the season usually brings. This is the eerie reality right now. A silent crisis is happening across America's travel industry, and the world is starting to look away. The stakes are incredibly high, as this isn't just about fewer tourists, it's about a major shift in global trust and the future of American influence. But what you will discover in this video is the shocking truth behind this disappearance act. We are going to reveal the real reasons why even the most loyal visitors are canceling their dreams of visiting America. So, what exactly caused this stunning reversal? And is there any way to bring the world back? PULLlNG Airlines, the low-cost carrier from Iceland, once looked like a golden bridge between Northern Europe and the United States. For years, it gave students, backpackers, and young dreamers cheap tickets to America, opening doors to summer jobs, cross-country road trips, and long-awaited visits to New York City. A $99 ticket from Reykjavik to Boston was not just a flight. For many, it was a promise of adventure and a rare chance to step into the world they had only seen in movies. That promise collapsed in March 2025. Overnight, without any announcement or warning, PULLlNG Airlines vanished from the American market. No press release, no farewell message, just empty booking systems where flights had been the day before. The first to notice were shocked passengers who suddenly found their travel plans erased. Their journeys disappeared like words wiped off a page, and in their place came silence. What looked like a quiet retreat was in fact the signal of something much bigger. The numbers tell the real story. According to the U.S. Travel Association, arrivals from Northern Europe to America dropped by more than 60% within less than a year. Tens of thousands of seats that had once been full were now left empty month after month. Routes that had buzzed with young travelers fell quiet, and airlines stopped advertising trips to cities that once symbolized the American dream. The collapse of PULLlNG Airlines in the U.S. market was not just a business failure. It marked a turning point in how a generation of travelers viewed America itself. Behind the statistics lies something even more troubling, a dramatic shift in mindset.
Feel like your friends and family feel comfortable traveling there?
No, nobody I know.
A survey by the European Travel Commission revealed that 71% of Nordic travelers now choose destinations like Canada or Japan instead of the United States. This was not only about airfare. Travelers spoke of deep worries about the rising cost of medical care in case of emergencies, about images of social unrest filling their news feeds, and about the lack of support from local authorities when things went wrong. For many young Europeans, the United States no longer felt like a safe gamble. It felt like a risk with too little reward. The change is clear in the words of those who work in the travel industry. A veteran tour guide in Reykjavik said that he once brought hundreds of people to New York every month. It was seen as the trip of a lifetime. But today, he tells his clients to go to Tokyo or Vancouver instead. America feels like a gamble, he explained. You might get something amazing, or you might face a costly disaster. Nobody wants to take that chance anymore. His words reflect not only his clients' concerns, but also a wider collapse in trust that cannot be repaired by cheap tickets alone. In Iceland alone, applications for U.S. visas have dropped nearly 48% in just a few years, while applications for countries like Canada and South Korea have more than doubled. This trend shows that America has not only lost budget flights, but also the goodwill and trust of young Europeans who once saw it as their dream destination. Trust is not something that disappears overnight, and once it is broken, it is hard to rebuild. The retreat of PULLlNG Airlines is more than the story of one airline. It is the symbol of how quickly perception can change when costs rise, risks grow, and confidence collapses. The airline's final step, shifting its operations to Malta and focusing on European holiday routes and aircraft leasing, confirmed what many already feared: that America no longer holds the same attraction it once did. If one airline from a small country could trigger such a massive shift in travel patterns, what happens when America's closest neighbors begin to pull back too? That is the question we face now, and the answer begins with a shock coming from Canada. For decades, Canada was America's most loyal travel partner. Families crossed the border for winter holidays, retirees known as snowbirds flew south to escape the freezing cold, and business travelers treated flights to New York or Los Angeles as routine as catching a bus. The link was so strong that many Canadians called the United States their backyard. That tradition broke apart in 2025 when Canada's two largest airlines, Air Canada and WestJet, suddenly slashed more than 40% of their U.S. flights, including some of the most popular routes that had been cultural lifelines for generations. The cuts were not small adjustments. They affected major destinations such as New York, Las Vegas, Orlando, and Los Angeles, cities that had long been magnets for Canadian tourists. For the first time in history, Canada began running more domestic flights than flights to the United States. Travel agencies across the country described it as a turning point, a clear signal that the old tradition of treating America like a second home was fading fast.
Well, Sandy, one travel agency says they've never seen anything like it. A sudden plunge in U.S. bookings and a surge in cancellations.
The numbers confirm this dramatic shift. Canadian bookings to the U.S. dropped by 53% in less than a year, while domestic trips within Canada and vacations to Mexico started booming. From British Columbia's lakeside resorts to the beaches of Cancun, Canadians are spending their money elsewhere, and they are doing so with confidence. The problem for America is that these travelers are not avoiding the U.S. because of price. They are avoiding it because they no longer trust the experience. Hidden costs play a major role in this distrust. A mid-range hotel in Los Angeles might advertise a price of $150 per night, but by the time a guest adds parking fees, resort charges, and other surprise bills, the cost balloons far beyond what was expected. The same amount of money, when spent in Quebec or British Columbia, covers a lakeside resort with breakfast included, no hidden fees, and the peace of mind that comes with a safe environment. For many travelers, the comparison speaks louder than any advertisement. Safety is another major concern. A recent survey showed that 69% of Canadians over the age of 50 now believe the United States is no longer a safe destination. These are not casual tourists, but loyal visitors who once formed the backbone of U.S. tourism. They are the snowbirds who used to spend entire winters in Florida or California supporting local businesses and communities. Losing their trust means losing not just visitors, but also a steady flow of long-term spending that sustained entire regions. Individual voices add weight to the statistics. A mother from Ottawa told CBC that she once thought of the U.S. as her family's backyard. Today, she refuses to take her children across the border. Her words reflect a growing feeling among Canadians that a trip to the United States carries too many risks, from street violence to unpredictable social unrest. What used to be an easy, familiar choice has turned into a decision filled with hesitation. The scale of this change is unprecedented. Canada has always been America's closest neighbor, sharing not just geography, but also culture and economy. When even this bond begins to break, it suggests that the problem is not temporary, but structural. Canada's withdrawal signals that the cracks in America's tourism industry run deeper than high ticket prices or complicated visa rules. They reveal a loss of confidence from people who know the U.S. best and have been most loyal for decades. If the closest neighbor is no longer willing to cross the border, what will happen when the world's most cautious and disciplined airlines begin to turn away as well? That is where the story moves next, with the shocking retreat of Lufthansa. Lufthansa has always been more than just an airline. It has been a symbol of German discipline, precision, and stability, the kind of brand that built its reputation on being cautious and calculating. For over 40 years, its routes to the United States stood as proof of the strong transatlantic bond. Frankfurt to Chicago, Frankfurt to Atlanta, Frankfurt to Miami, these were not just flight paths, they were bridges between two continents. That is why the silence that followed in 2025 shocked many. Without warning or press conferences, those routes simply vanished from the booking system. What looked like a quiet adjustment was in fact a decisive retreat. The airline did not cut corners. It shifted its focus entirely toward Asia. Flights to Tokyo, Seoul, Delhi, and Singapore were not only maintained but expanded, upgraded with newer aircraft and assigned to the most experienced crews. Schedules were moved into prime-time slots, showing that this was not an experiment but a deliberate pivot. For the first time since the end of World War II, the United States no longer held the title of Lufthansa's top priority. Instead, Asia became the stage for growth and confidence. The reasons behind this move were explained with unusual bluntness. A Lufthansa strategy executive told Süddeutsche Zeitung, "We're not leaving America because we dislike it. We're leaving because it no longer makes sense." He pointed out three clear problems. Currency fluctuations were driving up operating costs. Airport fees in the United States had risen so high that tickets lost their competitive edge. And most importantly, concerns about security had reached new heights, from protests and street violence to chaotic immigration checkpoints. The message was clear. Flying to the US had become more of a burden than a benefit. The numbers support this conclusion. Passenger traffic from Europe to the United States dropped 24% in 2024 alone, while flights from Europe to Asia grew at the fastest pace since 2011. This is not a coincidence. It reflects a shift in demand, in confidence, and in the way passengers judge their travel experiences. For Lufthansa, a company known for carefully weighing every decision, the calculation showed that long-term value was no longer found in American skies. The testimony of its pilots paints an even clearer picture. One veteran captain admitted that flying to Tokyo or Delhi was a relief. The atmosphere was calm, the process was orderly, and both crew and passengers felt respected. Flying to Houston, on the other hand, felt like stepping into stress. The flashing lights, the heavy police presence, the overpriced taxis, and the cold treatment at immigration all turned what should have been a routine route into a draining task. If even the crew dreaded these trips, passengers must have felt it even more strongly. The retreat of Lufthansa is not just about one airline leaving a few routes. It represents a wider trend that European aviation may find impossible to reverse. When a carrier known for caution and long-term planning decides that America no longer makes sense, others are bound to follow. It signals a loss of prestige and reliability for the US as a destination. In aviation, perception matters as much as reality, and once that perception tips, the consequences ripple far beyond the balance sheets. Lufthansa's decision is a warning, not only about costs and risks, but about image. The US was once the dream destination, the place where flights symbolized opportunity and success. Now it is being quietly replaced by Asia, where travelers describe their journeys as smooth, safe, and even enjoyable. For many Europeans, the story is no longer about chasing the American dream, but about avoiding unnecessary stress. If Lufthansa, the careful strategist, has already turned away, what about other European giants with their own history of flying across the Atlantic? That answer comes next, with Air France and KLM, two airlines that once treated New York as the crown jewel of their network, but are now saying farewell in a very different tone. Air France and KLM have always stood as proud symbols of Europe's connection to America. Paris to New York was once more than just a flight. It was a cultural link that tied the fashion capital of the world to the city that never sleeps. Amsterdam to Miami carried not only tourists, but also a sense of history, reflecting decades of trade and shared culture across the Atlantic. These routes were milestones, celebrated as the bridges that brought Europe and America closer together. That is why the sudden cuts in 2025 felt like more than a schedule change. They felt like the breaking of a tradition. In early 2025, the Franco-Dutch airline alliance reduced its flights to the United States by 30 to 45%, removing some of the most iconic routes from its list. Paris to New York, Paris to Houston, and Amsterdam to Miami were among those scaled back or quietly erased. What had once been the pride of the industry, the symbol of non-stop travel between two continents, was suddenly treated as optional, no longer the priority it used to be. The decision revealed a painful truth. America no longer held the same importance in the eyes of one of Europe's largest airline groups. The reasons given were not emotional but practical. Air France KLM, like Lufthansa, began shifting its focus to Asia. Flights to Tokyo, Seoul, Singapore, and Mumbai increased in frequency and were rewarded with the newest aircraft, such as the Airbus A350 and Boeing 787. Veteran crews were assigned to these routes, and prime departure slots were reserved for them. In other words, Asia became the place where resources were invested, while the US was downgraded to a secondary market. For the people flying these routes, the contrast was striking. One Air France captain admitted that when he started his career, flying to New York was his dream. It felt like stepping into the heart of the aviation world. But now, he said, he breathes a sigh of relief when he is assigned to Tokyo or Seoul. In Asia, the journey is described as calm, orderly, and even enjoyable. In the United States, it is too often stressful, unpredictable, and exhausting. The difference lies not in the planes, but in the experience on the ground. Passengers notice the same gap. In Paris, a trip to Tokyo is compared to the start of a holiday itself. The service feels smooth, safe, and respectful. A trip to New York, however, has become a trial. Travelers face chaotic immigration checks, fear of losing luggage, and sudden disruptions caused by protests or street crime. What should be the gateway to excitement instead feels like a gamble filled with stress. This is not only about inconvenience, it is about how travelers perceive the United States compared to other destinations. The statistics back up the stories. The load factor, the industry measure of how full flights are, has dropped below 70% on US routes, a red alert threshold for airlines. In contrast, Asian routes have reached between 90 and 95%, far exceeding expectations. These numbers show that the shift is not only in strategy, but also in demand. Passengers themselves are choosing Asia over America, confirming the decisions of the airlines. What makes Air France KLM's retreat so important is its tone. Lufthansa left America in a cold and calculated way, but Air France KLM's move feels more like a regretful goodbye. The airline is not angry, but it is tired. For decades, New York was treated as the jewel in its crown. Now, it has become a burden that drains resources and creates frustration. It is not the departure of an enemy, but the quiet turning away of an old friend. This farewell carries a warning. If even Paris, the world's tourism capital, starts telling travelers that Asia offers more peace, safety, and value than America, then the American tourism industry is facing more than competition. It is facing a loss of its reputation, the one thing that once made it shine across the globe. If Europe's most emotional connection is fading, what happens when airlines from the Pacific, known for their loyalty and cultural ties, decide to walk away as well? The answer lies in the shocking decision of Jetstar, Australia's symbol of youthful, adventurous travel. For Australians, Jetstar was more than a budget airline. It was the symbol of affordable adventure, the carrier that made the Pacific feel smaller and brought the dream of America within reach. Its Sydney-Los Angeles route was legendary, offering students and young dreamers a chance to cross the ocean without breaking the bank. Millions of Australians touched down in the United States through Jetstar, carrying not only their luggage but also the excitement of experiencing Hollywood, Hawaii, and the open roads of California. That dream ended in 2025 when Jetstar announced it was pulling out of the American market completely. The withdrawal was not limited to a single city. Every route to America disappeared. Los Angeles, Honolulu, San Francisco, all of them were erased from the airline's map in one decisive move. For the first time since its founding, Jetstar officially said goodbye to the United States. It was not a quiet retreat like Lufthansa's calculated move, nor was it a regretful farewell like Air France-KLM. It was blunt, harsh, and full of criticism. Jetstar's CEO made it clear: America had become too expensive, too complicated, and too unwelcoming for their passengers. The reasons were specific and shocking. In 2025, landing fees at U.S. airports jumped by 38%, a cost increase that immediately made budget flights less viable. On top of that, visa procedures remained long and confusing, frustrating travelers before they even boarded a plane. The final insult came at the border itself, where passengers often felt treated like threats rather than welcome guests. For an airline built on the promise of friendly and accessible travel, these conditions were impossible to defend. The impact hit hardest among older Australians. This group, known for their loyalty to familiar destinations, had spent years returning to the United States for vacations and family visits. Many of them felt deeply hurt by the lack of support at American airports. Complaints piled up about confusing entry rules, high emergency medical costs, and even the lack of language assistance, which felt ironic given that English is the common tongue. One retired couple from Melbourne recalled being detained for 2 hours at Los Angeles International Airport because of a minor passport mix-up. They described feeling like criminals just for traveling and swore never to return. Stories like theirs spread quickly, amplifying the sense that America no longer respected its visitors. The silence of Australians after Jetstar's departure may be even more dangerous than open protest. Australians are known for being polite and steady travelers. They rarely complain loudly or make dramatic gestures. Instead, when they lose faith in a destination, they simply choose another path and never come back. That quiet decision carries weight. When a loyal market walks away, the loss is not just financial. It represents the collapse of a cultural bridge, one that brought stability, friendliness, and long-term connections. The lesson here is that once trust is broken, it is almost impossible to win back. Tourism is not just about money or routes. It is about relationships built over time. For decades, Australians looked at America as a partner in travel, a place that felt both exciting and familiar. By driving them away, the U.S. risks losing not only revenue but also the steady flow of visitors who provided continuity and goodwill. Rebuilding that kind of loyalty could take a decade, and in some cases, it may never return. Jetstar's exit was a blow that echoed across the Pacific, proving that even markets once considered stable could collapse when costs rise and hospitality vanishes. But if international trust is fading, what happens when the crisis spreads inside America's own borders? That question leads us directly to the story of JetBlue and the shrinking skies over small-town America. If the retreat of foreign airlines shook America's image abroad, the crisis inside its own borders revealed something even more troubling. In 2025, JetBlue, once praised as a rising star for customer service, carried out the largest round of cuts in its history. 15 airports disappeared from its network overnight, and entire cities like Syracuse, Worcester, Kansas City, and Fresno were left without direct service. For residents of those places, it was more than an inconvenience. It felt like abandonment, as if their towns had been quietly erased from the national map. The cuts were not isolated to JetBlue. A wave of downsizing spread across domestic carriers, leaving small and medium-sized airports across the country struggling to survive. The Federal Aviation Administration reported that within a single year, 38% of smaller airports lost more than half of their daily flights. For many communities, each flight had been more than just transportation. It was a lifeline connecting them to education, healthcare, and the national economy. When those flights vanished, opportunities vanished with them. The causes behind this collapse were layered but clear. Fuel prices had risen 41% since 2022, turning short regional flights into financial traps for airlines. At the same time, staffing shortages reached critical levels. Pilots, maintenance crews, and baggage handlers were in short supply everywhere, and airlines were unable to keep schedules stable. Security incidents and chaos at airports only made matters worse, discouraging both passengers and crew from trusting the system. The result was an industry shrinking not by choice but by necessity. The impact on daily life was immediate and painful. Seniors in small towns who depended on short flights to see specialized doctors suddenly found those trips impossible. Students hoping to visit universities in other states faced expensive and time-consuming journeys. Local business owners who once relied on quick access to major markets found themselves cut off, unable to compete on equal footing. The shrinking of the aviation map was not just about empty terminals. It was about the slow shrinking of the American dream itself. Personal stories highlight the scale of this loss. A former JetBlue pilot in Ohio recalled flying to more than 30 states, often landing in small towns where people gathered just to watch the plane touch down. For many, the sound of engines overhead meant they were still connected to the wider world. Now, those flights are gone, and what remains is a silence that feels heavier than anyone expected. His words captured a truth that data alone cannot show. Losing flights means losing connection, and losing connection means losing hope. What makes this decline so striking is that it contrasts with the nation's past. America built its reputation on mobility, on the idea that every corner of the country was within reach. Air travel was not just about luxury, it was about opportunity, bringing together families, markets, and communities across thousands of miles. To see that system unravel is to watch a pillar of national identity collapse. The dream of freedom of movement, once so central to American life, is now being chipped away one canceled route at a time. The warning is clear. If small airports close and regional access fades, the United States risks creating invisible borders within its own territory. The world outside may already be turning away, but what happens when Americans themselves begin to lose faith in their ability to move freely? That is the question left hanging as the skies over America grow quieter, and it leads us directly to the final reckoning. What does this silence say about the future of the American dream? The story we've seen today is complex, but its core message is clear. Major airlines from Europe, Canada, and even Australia are making a historic shift away from the United States. They are redirecting their newest planes and best routes toward Asia, choosing destinations like Tokyo and Seoul over New York and Los Angeles. This isn't a simple change in vacation plans. It reflects a deeper global conversation about value, safety, and trust. The numbers are powerful evidence, showing a dramatic drop in international visitors and a concerning retreat from America's closest allies. However, recognizing a problem is always the first step toward fixing it. This moment, while challenging, presents a crucial opportunity. It's a chance for an honest conversation and for making smart changes that welcome the world back. The same spirit that once made the American dream a global symbol of possibility can still chart a new course forward. By focusing on better travel experiences and rebuilding those connections, the future can be different. The journey might be difficult, but the destination, a renewed and welcoming America, is worth the effort.